My name is Steven Quinn. I'm 68 years old, and I never thought I'd be telling this story at my age. For 40 years, I taught mathematics at one of Chicago's most prestigious high schools. Numbers were my life. Clean, logical, predictable. People, on the other hand, are anything but. Since my retirement, I've lived a quiet, structured life. My wife, Mary, passed away 5 years ago, leaving behind a silence that still hangs in every room. But she also left me something far more precious. Our son, David, and our granddaughter, Sarah, the light of my life. I don't think a day goes by that I don't think of them both. I often sit by the window in the mornings, sipping coffee and replaying old memories of Mary humming while watering her plants. That Tuesday morning was no different. I was reviewing my documents, a habit I had kept since retirement, bills, receipts, and my monthly bank statements. It was my small ritual of order and control in a world that no longer needed me to teach equations or balance grades. Then my phone rang. "Hello," I answered without checking the caller ID. "Dad, how are you? I need to see you urgently." It was David. His voice was rushed, almost breathless. Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. "I'm fine, son. Is something wrong?" No, it's nothing like that. It's an incredible business opportunity, but I have to explain it in person. Can I come by in an hour?" Before I could even respond, the line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment. An incredible business opportunity? That wasn't David. He was an engineer, the kind who believed in stability, not risk. He'd worked for a major construction firm for 15 years. Always responsible, always methodical. I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard him use words like investment or opportunity. Still, he was my son, and if something was wrong, I wanted to help. At exactly 11 o'clock a.m., the doorbell rang. David had always been punctual. I opened the door expecting just him, but standing beside him was a man I instantly disliked. "Mr. Quinn," the stranger exclaimed, spreading his arms like we were old friends. "It's so great to see you looking so well." He was thin, slickly dressed, with a salesman's grin that never quite reached his eyes. "This is Ryan, my brother-in-law," David said quickly. I gave a polite nod. "Come in." They sat down in my living room. David seemed uncomfortable, fidgeting with his hands, while Ryan looked perfectly at ease. Too at ease. He immediately pulled out a sleek tablet and set it on the coffee table. "Mr. Quinn," Ryan began, "we've come today because we have a proposal that will change your life and the life of your entire family." He swiped the tablet and a glossy presentation began playing. Photos of beaches, palm trees, and luxurious buildings flashed across the screen. A resort on the coast of Florida, complete with golf courses, private villas, and yachts. "We're developing a tourist paradise," Ryan continued smoothly. "We already have the land, the permits, and a network of investors. What we need is an initial capital boost to launch construction. The return will be massive, double the investment in just 6 months." I listened quietly. After 40 years of teaching, I developed a strong sense for when someone was bluffing. Ryan was oozing confidence, but his eyes darted every few seconds. He was selling, not explaining. "And what exactly are you asking for?" I said calmly. Ryan smiled like a magician about to reveal his trick. "We just need an initial investment of $4 million. And you, Mr. Quinn, happen to have that exact amount in your retirement savings." My heart skipped a beat. How the hell did he know that? I turned to David, who immediately avoided my gaze. "Son," I said slowly, "did you tell him about my finances?" David shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, listen. It's a safe investment. Ryan has all the contacts, bankers, developers, everything. We'll double your money and it'll secure Sarah's college fund forever. It's an incredible opportunity." My patience snapped. "No." David blinked. "What?" "No," I repeated firmly. "That money is my security for my old age and for Sarah's education. It's not up for discussion." Ryan's smile twitched just for a second before he plastered it back on. "Mr. Quinn, with all due respect, you're missing the chance of a lifetime—" "I've already given my answer," I interrupted, standing up. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things to do." That should have ended it, but as Ryan gathered his tablet and papers, I caught the look on his face. thinly veiled frustration, the kind of look predators get when their prey doesn't take the bait. David stayed behind as Ryan muttered something about next time and went outside to wait in the car. "Dad," David said after a long silence, "I need to talk to you privately." I sat down again, folding my hands. "I'm listening." David stared at the floor. "The truth is, I'm in trouble." I felt my stomach drop. "What kind of trouble?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "I took out a large loan to invest with Ryan in a previous business. It didn't go well. Now I owe money to some dangerous people." "Dangerous people?" I repeated, my voice rising. "David, how much do you owe?" He took a shaky breath. $1,200,000. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. 1.2 million? He nodded miserably. "I thought I could fix it. I didn't want to worry you, Dad." My mind raced. My son, my responsible, level-headed son, had somehow fallen into this nightmare. "And what exactly do you expect me to do?" "Lend me the money," he said desperately. "Please, Dad. I swear I'll pay you back. It's for everyone's safety, even Sarah's." The mention of my granddaughter hit me like a punch. He knew how much she meant to me. I sat in silence for several long seconds, staring at the framed photo of Sarah on the mantel, her bright smile, her curly hair. Finally, I said, "I'll give you 600,000, not a dollar more, and you'll sign a promissory note agreeing to pay it back in monthly installments." David's face twisted with disappointment. "Dad, that's not enough." "That's my final word," I cut in. "Take it or leave it." He exhaled heavily, then nodded. "Okay, thanks, Dad. I'll come by tomorrow for the transfer and sign whatever you want." After he left, I sat there in silence for a long time. The quiet of the house felt heavier than usual. Something in David's eyes that afternoon had unsettled me deeply. Not fear, not gratitude. Something darker. Something like resentment. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like an accusation. I thought about Mary and what she'd say if she were here. She'd probably tell me I did the right thing, that a father's love sometimes means saying no. The next morning, true to his word, David returned. I transferred the money and had him sign the document in front of my lawyer. He smiled weakly, thanked me, and left. For a week, things seemed normal. David called often, more than usual. He asked how I was feeling, if I'd been taking my medications, if I'd eaten properly. He even started taking me to doctor appointments for preventive checkups. At first, I thought it was guilt, that he was trying to make up for his mistake. But then I noticed something else. Every time the doctor handed me a form, David would hover over my shoulder watching what I signed. Every prescription, every insurance paper, every routine exam, he wanted to see it all. And sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking, he'd take pictures of my documents with his phone. One day as we left the clinic, I finally asked, "Why are you so interested in my medical papers, David?" He gave a nervous laugh. "Just being thorough, Dad. You never know when insurance might need them." I didn't buy it, not for a second, but I said nothing. I wanted to see where this would go. The next Tuesday, he arrived again, this time looking oddly excited. "Dad, I need you to come with me," he said. "Where?" "I've found an incredible place for you. You'll be comfortable with medical attention 24 hours a day." "What are you talking about? I'm perfectly fine here in my house." "Dad, you live alone. What if you fall or get sick? No one would be there to help." "I have neighbors. I have my phone. Just come see," he insisted. "If you don't like it, I'll bring you right back." Reluctantly, I agreed. I thought maybe he'd found some retirement community brochure and wanted to convince me to plan for the future. I had no idea that this short trip would be the start of the darkest chapter of my life. That day, I still believed my son was just worried about me. That day, I still believed family meant safety. But I would soon learn that even blood can turn cold when money starts to whisper. And the math of betrayal always adds up perfectly. When David said I should visit a place where I could rest with 24-hour medical attention, I thought it was just his way of being helpful. After all, he had been unusually attentive lately, driving me to doctor appointments, checking my medication, and calling multiple times a day. It was odd, yes, but I wanted to believe it was just concern. A father always wants to see the good in his son. So that Tuesday I reluctantly agreed. I didn't know I was stepping into a trap designed with precision and patience, a trap that would test every lesson I had ever taught about trust, logic, and the people we think we know. We drove for about an hour, winding through suburban streets lined with manicured lawns and perfectly trimmed hedges. I noticed how David's smile seemed to grow wider with each turn. He was thrilled about this place, and I didn't understand why. When we arrived, the building looked perfectly ordinary at first glance. A neatly paved driveway, clean windows, friendly staff waving from the lobby. The sign read, Golden Horizons, luxury senior living facility. "See, Dad," David said, his voice brimming with pride. "It's just what I wanted for you. You'll be safe, well cared for, and you can meet other people your age. Isn't it wonderful?" I hesitated at the entrance. There was nothing outwardly alarming. The building was immaculate, the garden well kept, and even the smell was clean, like fresh soap and flowers. Still, something about David's insistence didn't sit right with me. A woman in her 60s, who introduced herself as the director, greeted us warmly. Her name tag read Marjorie Hayes. She had soft gray hair pulled back neatly and a smile that suggested authority, friendliness, and efficiency all at once. "Mr. Quinn, welcome to Golden Horizons," she said, shaking my hand. "We take pride in providing the very best care. You'll be comfortable here. Full-time doctors, nurses, recreational activities, you name it." I nodded, scanning the lobby, which smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. At first glance, everything seemed perfect. Marjorie led us on a tour. The rooms were spacious, with big windows letting in sunlight. There were common areas for social gatherings, activity rooms with puzzles and card games, and a small library. The garden was serene, with benches and walking paths. I even noticed a few residents sitting quietly, some reading newspapers, others chatting softly with each other. But there was something off. A few of them stared at me strangely. Wide eyes, tight smiles, expressions that almost begged me to leave. David's grin never faltered. "See, Dad, this is perfect." I forced a polite smile, trying to mask the unease bubbling inside me. After the tour, David turned to me. "I've already paid for 3 months in advance. They reserved a nice room for you and everything's set up. Just stay for 1 week. If you don't like it, I'll bring you home immediately." I froze. 3 months? Without consulting me? "David," I said slowly, trying to remain calm. "I said I'd stay for a week. I didn't agree to 3 months. I don't need a facility like this yet." He shook his head, still smiling. "Dad, it's all arranged. I just want you safe. Please, just 1 week. That's all I'm asking." Reluctantly, I agreed. I told myself I would stay for the week and then leave. 1 week was all it would take to see the truth behind his obsession with this place. The staff helped me settle into the room. It was comfortable, surprisingly so, though unfamiliar. I unpacked my small suitcase, placed Sarah's photo on the bedside table, and tried to make the room feel like home. But no matter how I arranged my things, a sense of unease lingered in the air. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the feeling that something was wrong. David had been overly enthusiastic, almost pushy about this arrangement. His frequent visits, the insistence on health checkups, the urgent tone about dangerous people and investments, all of it now seemed like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't yet solved. The next morning, I realized something alarming. My cell phone was gone. I asked the nurse, a young woman with a bored expression, where my phone was. "You can use the common area phone during designated hours," she said without looking up. "What?" I demanded. "I need to call my son." "The phone in your room is unavailable. Your son left instructions not to disturb you this week. He's on a business trip." I felt my heart start to race. "David is where? And why did he give instructions without asking me?" The director appeared suddenly, as if sensing my panic. "Mr. Quinn, your admission has been registered as permanent, not temporary. Your son signed all the documents. Don't worry, we've also received medical reports indicating that you need constant supervision. Early onset dementia, according to your diagnosis." I blinked. "What? That's absurd. I'm perfectly fine. I can live alone." Patients often deny their condition, Marjorie said, smiling with that infuriating condescension. But we are here to help. You'll be safe and you'll be comfortable. Don't worry about a thing. I tried to stand and leave, but a security guard blocked my path. Sir, he said politely but firmly, you cannot leave without authorization. My chest tightened. I felt the panic rising like a wave. My own son had locked me in this place, using forged documents and a fake diagnosis to gain control over my life. I sat down, trying to think. How could he do this? How could the son I had raised, the boy who learned algebra and trigonometry at my kitchen table, the boy who knew the value of honesty and integrity, betray me like this? I spent the first few days in quiet observation. The routine was regimented, almost military-like. Meals at specific times, medications at specific hours, scheduled activities designed to occupy the residents. I noticed subtle things, the way some staff avoided eye contact when certain residents expressed frustration, the hurried tone in which reports were written, the way cameras covered every hallway and entrance. Then I met Helen Smith. She was seated across from me in the dining hall, quietly observing the room with keen, intelligent eyes. Her posture was alert, not defeated. You shouldn't be here, she whispered when I approached her. I saw you arrive, she continued, lowering her voice further. Your son, he's not thinking about your well-being. Neither is anyone here. They're all part of the system. The system? I asked, my heart thudding. Yes, this place isn't a retirement home. It's a trap for wealthy seniors. They fabricate diagnoses, forge documents, and restrict access to communication to gain control of your finances. Your son signed you in here, and he wasn't alone. He has help. I felt nausea rise. You mean David? He did this to take my money? Helen nodded grimly. And if you don't act fast, it could be permanent. The legal system often sides with the documents, not the truth, especially when the papers appear official. For the first time in my life, I felt utterly powerless. And yet, my mind, trained for decades in logic, numbers, and strategy, refused to give in. I spent that night planning, observing, noting patterns, memorizing routines. I watched the staff, the cameras, the entrances and exits. I cataloged everything in my head. David had underestimated me. He had assumed that because I was elderly, I would be compliant, accepting, perhaps even grateful for concern, disguised as control. But he had forgotten one thing. I was a teacher, a mathematician, a problem solver. Every detail mattered, every move could be predicted and countered. I couldn't leave yet, not without a plan, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. David Quinn had just opened a door into a game he wasn't prepared to play, and I intended to win. By the third day at Golden Horizons, I had come to understand one undeniable truth. I was trapped, not just physically, but legally and psychologically. My son, David, had turned a place meant for care into a cage, a well-oiled machine designed to strip me of independence and ultimately, my fortune. I spent hours walking the hallways pretending to participate in activities, nodding politely at staff while mentally cataloging every detail. The schedule was precise. Meals at 8 a.m., 12 p.m., and 6 p.m., medication rounds twice a day. Recreational activities in the afternoon. Security checks every hour, cameras in every corridor, staff that rotated shifts to prevent familiarity, and residents, quiet, withdrawn, some frightened, some resigned. That's when I met Helen Smith again. She was sitting at the small dining table near the window, quietly picking at her lunch. Her hair was streaked with silver, and her eyes held a sharp intelligence that seemed to pierce through the calm facade of the facility. I approached cautiously. You shouldn't be here, she whispered, leaning in slightly. I blinked. How do you know that? I saw you arrive, she said, her voice low, urgent. And I've been here long enough to know the signs. Your son, he isn't thinking about your well-being. Neither is anyone else here. This place, it's not a retirement home. It's a trap. I sat down, leaning closer. A trap? What do you mean? Helen's eyes scanned the dining hall, then returned to mine. They manufacture diagnoses, forge documents, and restrict your ability to communicate with the outside world. People like your son, he's not alone. They exploit families' trust and manipulate the legal system. Once the paperwork is signed, it's nearly impossible to reverse. I swallowed hard. My mind raced. You mean, David, he's working with them to take my money? Helen nodded grimly. And not just yours. They've done this to dozens of other residents. They wait for someone like you, a wealthy, independent person, and then they strike. They isolate you, intimidate you, and create a legal smokescreen so thick that by the time the family notices, it's too late. I felt a cold knot of anger in my chest. David, my son, my own blood. He had betrayed me, manipulated me, and now he had set in motion a plan to steal my life savings. And yet, amidst the fear and despair, something familiar awakened inside me. The mathematician, the teacher, the problem solver. I had one advantage they hadn't counted on. My mind. Helen leaned closer. You need a plan. You can't act recklessly, but you can gather evidence. Document everything. Every shift change, every staff interaction, every phone call they prevent. There's a system here. If you can understand it, you can use it against them. I nodded slowly. I'll do whatever it takes, but Helen, how do I know I can trust you? Her eyes softened slightly. I've been here for over a year. I was admitted against my will too. My son wanted control of my estate. But I've survived by observing and learning. I can help you. From that moment, we became quiet allies. She taught me which staff members could be influenced, which doors were often left unlocked, and which areas had surveillance gaps. I began memorizing every pattern, the way nurses delivered medications, the schedule of the rotating security staff, the timing of recreational activities. At night, I studied the room layouts, the fire exits, and the camera placements. I wrote notes on scraps of paper and hid them in my mattress. Every day, I observed the residents. Some of them gave subtle warnings with their eyes, a flicker, a glance, a slight shake of the head. I could feel their silent communication. They knew what this place was. One evening during dinner, Helen whispered something that sent chills down my spine. They've got files on you, digital, scanned, stored in their system. Your medical records, your finances, even your promissory note with your son. Everything is there. If you leave, you need that evidence or they'll rewrite history and say you're unstable. I clenched my fists beneath the table. My mind raced. How could I get access to the files without alerting the staff? How could I prove my sanity when the system was designed to claim otherwise? Over the next 2 days, I began testing boundaries. I tried small things, standing near a staff computer terminal when no one was watching, memorizing passwords scrawled on sticky notes, noting which laptops were left unattended. Helen helped me navigate the system subtly. Then I realized something crucial. Their arrogance was my ally. They had underestimated me. They assumed that because I was older, I was compliant, passive, and easily manipulated. But they didn't know that I had spent a lifetime teaching logic, probability, and deduction. Every routine they had built was predictable, and every predictable pattern could be exploited. On the 4th day, I managed to get hold of an unattended staff laptop. I opened the system cautiously, praying no one would notice. There it was, my medical file, scanned documents, even a signed copy of the permanent admission form. My promissory note with David, the forged dementia diagnosis, internal staff memos, all neatly archived. I felt a surge of triumph and rage. This was my evidence, my lifeline. With this, I could fight back, not just for myself, but for every resident trapped in this system. Helen and I spent that night planning our next move. We would need a way to get the data safely out of the facility. Even one small mistake could alert the staff, and David, or worse, Ryan, could take steps to lock me in permanently. I realized then that this was no longer just about money. It was about justice, dignity, and reclaiming my autonomy. My son had made a colossal mistake. He had underestimated the quiet, deliberate mind of a man who had spent decades solving problems and teaching young minds to think critically. The math of revenge is precise. It has steps, rules, and patterns. And for every equation, there is a solution. David Quinn had opened a door he should have left closed, and I was about to show him that I was not a man to be calculated away. That night, I slept with one eye open, heart racing, already mentally rehearsing every detail, every sequence, every step of the plan. Golden Horizons was a fortress, but every fortress has a weakness. Every algorithm has a loophole, and I intended to find them all. By the fifth day at Golden Horizons, I had learned everything I needed to know about my prison. Every hallway, every locked door, every camera angle, every staff rotation, I knew them all. My mind, trained for decades in logic, patterns, and problem solving, was working overtime. David and his accomplices had underestimated me, and that would be their first mistake. Helen and I had spent hours mapping the facility, sharing insights, and quietly observing the staff. She had insider knowledge from her year of captivity. She knew which employees could be bribed, which ones were loyal to the system, and which ones were indifferent enough to be useful. Together, we were a small but formidable team. That evening, Helen handed me a small piece of paper with a list of staff names and shift timings. "You'll need to know who comes and goes," she said, her voice low but steady. "Timing is everything. One mistake, and they'll lock you in permanently." I nodded. I already had a plan forming in my mind, a precise, step-by-step method to reclaim my life and expose the conspiracy. I called it the revenge formula. Step 1. Access the digital files. I had already memorized the locations of the staff laptops. I knew which ones were left unattended for long enough to allow me to log in without being noticed. And most importantly, I had Helen guiding me on which data to prioritize. My forged dementia diagnosis, the permanent admission form signed by David, scanned copies of my financial documents, and the internal communications that proved the staff were complicit in this fraud. Step 2. Extract evidence without detection. I realized quickly that printing anything was too risky. The printers were monitored and required staff approval. Helen suggested a simpler method. I could transfer encrypted files to a USB hidden inside a book from the library, one of the few areas where cameras were sparse. The staff never checked which books were removed from the shelves. They assumed residents only took reading materials for leisure. It was a perfect loophole. Step 3. Document staff routines. Observation was key. Each staff member followed predictable patterns: meal deliveries, medication rounds, recreational supervision. By memorizing these, I could create small windows of opportunity to move through restricted areas undetected. I spent hours taking mental notes, recording sequences in my head like an equation, rehearsing the steps in exact order until they were flawless. Step 4. Establish external communication. Without access to my phone or email, I had to find a way to get this evidence out of Golden Horizons. Helen suggested the delivery drivers. Packages arrived daily: food, mail, supplies. I could secretly include the USB stick in a package destined for a friendly courier outside the facility. Once the files were outside, I could share them with a lawyer and a journalist, ensuring that the conspiracy would be exposed publicly. Step 5. Keep my sanity intact. This was perhaps the hardest part. Every day I had to maintain the facade of compliance. I smiled when required, participated in activities, and even pretended to be a confused senior at times. Every interaction was calculated. One wrong move could alert the staff that I wasn't the compliant resident they expected, and then the formula would collapse. That night, I executed step 1. I waited until a young nurse, distracted by paperwork, left her laptop unattended in the nurse's station. I approached cautiously, heart pounding. My fingers, trained by decades of typing grades and solving equations, moved quickly across the keyboard. I logged in using a combination of default passwords and cues I had noticed over the last few days. There it was, my digital file. Every piece of evidence I had feared would be hidden: scanned medical records, the forged permanent admission form, internal memos, even emails between staff discussing the fraudulent operations. And there it was, David's signature, the digital stamp confirming he had knowingly admitted me under false pretenses. I felt a surge of triumph, tempered by anger. This was more than evidence. It was the key to my freedom and justice. Step 2 required finesse. I carefully copied all the files onto a small USB stick, which I then slipped into a hollowed-out book I had taken from the library. No one noticed. Every movement was deliberate. Every second counted. For the next 2 days, Helen and I observed, rehearsed, and executed small maneuvers. We watched the staff change shifts, we noted the security patterns, and we mapped the camera blind spots. Every calculation was precise. Every probability accounted for. On the 7th day, I was ready for the final step, external communication. A delivery van arrived with a stack of packages. I slipped the book containing the USB stick into a box of medical supplies, carefully labeling it with the facility's own delivery tag. I watched as the van driver collected it and left. The files were now safely outside, in the hands of people who could ensure the truth would come to light. That night, I sat with Helen in my room, a sense of calm washing over me for the first time in days. "It's done," I whispered. "The evidence is out. They can't ignore it now." Helen smiled, though cautiously. "You've done well, Steven, but remember, we're not safe yet. They'll try to cover their tracks. Timing is everything. Patience is everything." I nodded. For the first time since arriving, I felt a sense of control. I realized that David and his accomplices had made a fatal error. They had underestimated not only my mind, but my resolve. The next morning, the atmosphere in Golden Horizons shifted slightly. Staff who were normally indifferent now glanced at me with subtle wariness. I could feel the tension in the air, though I remained outwardly calm. Smiled politely, played the role of the compliant resident, and waited. Then it began. I started receiving indirect warnings. A nurse who had always been cheerful now avoided my gaze. A security guard lingered near the elevator longer than necessary, observing. They didn't know that I was aware of their every move. They didn't know that the evidence was already outside the facility, in the hands of people who could bring down the entire network. By evening, I was confident. The revenge formula was in motion, and every step was calculated. David had gambled with his father's life, and I had turned his own arrogance into a series of predictable outcomes. I could almost hear the math in my head, the sequence of events, the chain of cause and effect. Every lie, every deception, every forged document, they all added up to a single solution: justice. And justice, as I had learned in decades of teaching, is not random. It is precise. It is inevitable. David Quinn would soon learn the most important lesson of all. You can manipulate people. You can forge documents, and you can hide behind false diagnoses, but you cannot outsmart a man who has spent his life solving impossible problems. And I was about to prove it. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, but I felt no warmth. Instead, a cold determination coursed through my veins. For a week, I had played the part of the compliant resident, observed every detail, memorized every schedule, and most importantly, ensured that the evidence of my son's betrayal and the facility's criminal operations was safely outside the building. Helen sat across from me at breakfast, her eyes sharp and alert. "Are you ready?" she asked. I nodded. "This ends today. Everything we've done, the files, the surveillance, the documentation, it's all in place. The authorities and the journalists have everything they need. Now we just wait for the dominoes to fall." Her face softened slightly. "Be careful. They won't go down quietly." I smiled faintly. I had already anticipated their arrogance. David and his network believed themselves untouchable. They thought that a wealthy senior, confined and labeled as mentally unfit, would be powerless to challenge them. They were wrong. By late morning, subtle changes began to ripple through Golden Horizons. Staff that had previously ignored me now glanced in my direction, their expressions slightly nervous. Doors that had been locked the day before were suddenly open longer, or left unattended. I could feel the tension building in the air, like the charged atmosphere before a storm. It was a quiet war fought with patience and intellect. I walked to the common area, smiling politely at the staff, conversing with residents as if nothing were wrong, all the while watching, calculating, waiting for the precise moment to act. Then the first ripple of justice reached the facility. The authorities arrived. It started with a knock at the front doors. I noticed the guards stiffen immediately. Marjorie, the director, appeared, attempting her usual calm smile, but it faltered. Her phone buzzed constantly, and soon police officers and regulatory agents streamed into the lobby. "What is happening?" I asked, feigning ignorance. Helen leaned in and whispered, "They've received the evidence. The investigation has begun." The officers began reviewing documents and questioning staff. Marjorie tried to maintain composure, but it was obvious she had no defense. Internal records, financial transactions, scanned medical files, and David's forged signature were all presented as proof. The officers' expressions hardened as they realized the scope of the fraud. Meanwhile, my son, David, had no idea the trap had been set. He was busy on a business trip, oblivious to the chaos his actions had unleashed. Ryan, the schemer who had initially introduced the Florida resort scam, was unreachable, but the network they had built over months was crumbling fast. I walked through the facility calmly, chatting with residents, smiling and nodding. The staff avoided eye contact, whispers passing behind my back, but none dared confront me. Their fear was palpable. They had underestimated the mind of a man who had spent his life solving problems, thinking logically and systematically. By midday, law enforcement began detaining key staff members for questioning. The facility was thrown into chaos. Marjorie attempted to explain away the documents, claiming procedural errors and miscommunication. But the evidence was undeniable. Every forged document, every email, every scanned file was cross-referenced and verified. And then, the icing on the cake. David was notified of the investigation. He called, panicked, from the airport. "Dad, what's happening? I don't understand." I didn't answer at first. Instead, I listened to the frantic voice, noting the tremor in his tone, the arrogance, the confidence, the sense of control he had wielded over me for days, gone. "David," I said finally, calm and measured, "do you remember the investment you begged me to lend you money for?" "Yes, Dad, but this is different." "No, David, this is exactly the same. You underestimated me. You thought I would be compliant. You thought I would be silenced. You thought I would accept a false diagnosis without question. You miscalculated. Big mistake." He was silent. I could almost hear him searching for words that wouldn't come. "You forged documents. You manipulated the staff. You turned my life into a cage for your own greed. But you forgot one thing. I am not just your father. I am a teacher. I am a mathematician. And I solve problems." By the end of the day, David's accomplices were under investigation. Ryan's company was scrutinized. The internal network of forged admissions, illegal manipulations, and elder abuse was being exposed for the first time. Golden Horizons management was on the defensive, scrambling to contain the fallout. I walked back to my room and saw Helen waiting. "You did it," she said softly. "No," I replied, "we did it." She smiled. "And David?" "David will face the consequences," I said, watching the sun set through my window. "But more importantly, the other residents are safe now. Their voices are being heard. Their evidence is out in the world." The legal process moved quickly after that. David was arrested on multiple charges: fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy, and forgery. Ryan disappeared, attempting to flee abroad, but authorities traced him and froze his assets. Marjorie and several staff members faced criminal and civil penalties. The promissory note I had forced David to sign became a key piece of evidence. In court, I watched him stand, defeated, as lawyers detailed his manipulation. When asked if I forgave him, I said calmly, looking at my son, who had once been my pride, "I taught you numbers, David. I taught you equations, formulas, and logic. But you forgot the most important lesson. You cannot calculate the value of a human life with money." After the trial, Helen moved in with a friend, no longer trapped, free to live her life again. I regained control of my finances, safeguarding Sarah's future and my own peace of mind. I decided to use part of the recovered funds to establish a foundation for victims of financial elder abuse, ensuring no other senior would suffer as I had almost suffered. And every evening I write my story, not out of anger, but as a reminder that even when betrayal comes from the closest people, even when systems are built to silence you, justice is not only possible, it is inevitable. David learned far too late that blood alone does not guarantee loyalty, and greed always has consequences. And for me, the lesson is simple. In life, as in mathematics, every deception, every lie, every attempt to manipulate the system can be solved. Because in the end, logic and persistence always add up.